We get a first-hand recap of the Kings' trip to Australia, plus thoughts on what we've seen so far this preseason with LA Kings Insider Zach Dooley on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love you to leave us a positive comment on Apple Podcasts if you're a fan of the show. And we're also on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this content. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years, 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network, also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 17 years, and of course, a passionate LA Kings fan for 30 years. We are 13 days away from opening night for the LA Kings as we get ready to start the 2023-24 season, and we continue to get ready for the start of the season by having a special guest to talk about what we've seen so far, and we bring in now LA Kings insider Zach Dooley. You can follow him on Twitter. I'm still calling it Twitter, at Dooley, L-A-K, D-O-O-L-E-Y. And you can also check out his good work at LAKingsInsider.com. Zach, welcome back from Australia. How you doing?
Thanks, man. I see you still got the bird logo in the bio here for Twitter. So I appreciate the dedication to the brand. But I'm doing good. It was an unreal trip, both from a hockey standpoint and just an experiencing Australia standpoint. Great to be back, but a lot of good memories from that trip.
It certainly seemed like a very positive experience for all, the league, the Kings, the fans, growing the game. Looked like a great show, looked like a great venue, just seemed like a really positive experience all the way around.
Yeah, all the above was unreal, right? Like it's Rod Laver Arena. You watch the Australian Open there early in the morning pretty much every year. So it's really cool to play there. The crowds were packed. I think it was sold out both nights. Couldn't find a seat in the building, and you saw probably all 32 logos on a t-shirt or a jersey throughout the building. The fans were really, really great. They knew the game. They were into it. Great energy, great atmosphere. And then all the other stuff that we got to do away from the rink was really sick too. See some animals, see some different sports. Really, really special trip, I think, for myself for sure. But I think the players and the coaches felt the same way.
And also a very special trip, obviously, for defenseman Jordan Spence, who was born in Australia. I know he wasn't raised there, but it still had to be special for him. And he played pretty well, too. Now, we're going to talk about Brandt Clarke in a bit, but what are your thoughts on Jordan Spence and how he looked and how things might play out with him this season?
I thought Jordan Spence had an excellent trip. And Todd McClellan agreed this morning. He was one of the standouts of the younger guys that were there in McClellan's eyes. So I thought that was really cool. You know, the ovation that he got announced as a starter in the second game was the loudest roar of the entire weekend. They said, you know, Sydney, Australia, and the crowd just went berserk when they announced him as a starter. That was really cool. And there was all that going on for him, and that was special. But this is also like a huge training camp for Jordan Spence. Like, this is his opportunity to make the club out of camp that he hasn't had over the last 2 years. And he's very focused on that as well. So there was all that other stuff going on, and that was special. It's good memory for him. But he's here to make the LA Kings, and there's a spot on the right side. You mentioned Brandt Clarke. It's likely between those two guys for that RG3 spot, both very skilled players. And in his first opportunity to kind of showcase what he could do, I thought Jordan Spence made the most of his games there.
And I got to say, as a fan, I'm really torn on this because I've always been a Jordan Spence fan. I'm really looking forward to him getting a chance, but it's hard not to be excited about Brandt Clarke too. I guess the good news is there's no loser. I mean, from a fan standpoint, either way, right? You're going to get a good, young, exciting player either way, but it's exciting, but I'm a little bit torn as a fan.
Look, we're likely to see both those guys this year, right? It's unlikely that all 6D are going to stay healthy for 82 games. Like, we're probably going to see both of these guys at some point, and they're both very exciting. They're both dynamic. They both have that offensive flair. They both produced very, very well at lower levels. Spence, one of the best producing defensemen in the AHL over the last 2 years. And Brandt Clarke, we saw what he did in the OHL, almost 2 points per game. So these are both two very exciting guys, and both have so far shown very well in the exhibition season. And the best thing that they both can do is make that decision impossible, right? Mm-hmm. Make it impossible to get cut. so far, both those guys have made this a very, very tough decision. There's still a few exhibition games left. We're likely to see both those guys feature several times. And if they just keep doing what they're doing, they're going to keep making this a tough decision on the coaches and on the management here. You want to make it impossible to send you down. And I think that's what both these guys are going to focus on doing. And so far, so good.
We got our first look at Pierre-Luc Dubois, or as we found out on the broadcast, he prefers to be called PL Dubois. He centered a line with Kevin Fiala and Arthur Kaliev. Early impressions on how he's fitting in and how the Kings intend to use him.
Well, what Todd said was he came as advertised, right? You saw the player in his eyes that he thought he was getting. And I think there were certainly some growing pains. You saw it. It's a new structure for him to learn with the 1-3-1 and the way that the Kings play. And it's a new line, right? Kevin Fiala is one of the most interesting playmakers in the league because of how he can make these plays that you never see coming. But if you're on his line, you have to see it coming, right? You got to be on the other end of that. You have to be ready to play with a guy like Fiala. That's going to take a little bit of time, but there's three really, really skilled players on that line. And you saw the work that Dubois did along the boards, very good along the boards, made a couple of plays down low in tight spaces. You can see exactly why the Kings wanted that player. I think it's going to take a little bit of time for that line to kind of come together. But if it works as intended, that could be an absolutely dynamic line for the LA Kings with Fiala, Dubois, and Arthur Kaliev. Very difficult to match up against when you also think about the Danault line and the Kopitar line. So far, so good on Dubois. Excited to see how he kind of keeps evolving within the system as the preseason goes on.
We saw all three goalies in action in Melbourne. Phoenix Copley started it off, played the first 2 periods of game 1. Cam Talbot played the first 2 periods of game 2, while David Riddick played the third periods of each game. Early thoughts on the situation in net?
I think it's still unresolved. I don't think 2 periods for a goalie in the preseason is going to change anything. Cam Talbot, probably the best showing between the three of them. Riddick's just hard to really evaluate because he got the third period of 2 games, not 2 consecutive periods. I thought Talbot was very good. Clear that he understands the group in front of him because he's played behind a McClellan team for 4 years with the Edmonton Oilers. So he's new to the Kings, but he's not new to the Todd McClellan system. And I think that is important to kind of know the reads, to know what guys are going to likely to be doing in front of you. He looked comfortable for sure, made a couple of really nice saves. So first debut for Cam Talbot, very strong. The game for Copley, maybe not his best showing or the team's best defensively. There were a lot of individual mistakes in that game, but the sample size that he produced last year outweighs the sample size of 2 periods in Melbourne. So still a very much up in the air battle. 3 guys who have a lot of NHL experience, guys who will battle for that job. And I think we'll see all 3 of them at least once here in the final week and a half of the preseason.
And also one clear battle going on in training camp. Left side D, third pairing, Andreas Engelland, Tobias Bjornfoot. I thought Todd McClellan really spelled it out with Bjornfoot saying that it's his time. And I love the quote, vanilla is not good enough, that he's got to do some things to stand out on the ice. How do you think he's responded to that so far? I know just 1 game played, but maybe just not just the game we saw, but also maybe what he's doing in practice. Are we seeing him trying to assert himself a little bit more?
I think you could even call it a 3-player battle, right? Jacob Moverara also on that trip and had a really nice goal in that second game. The thing with Bjornfoot is his abilities are evident, right? He's a very strong skater, moves pucks well, a little bit of tenacity to his game. But the word that Todd always says is like when Toby's at his best, he's asserting his game. He's not receiving the game. He is asserting his game on the game. Like that's a terrible phrase, but that's how he's playing, right? Like he's asserting himself into the game, not the other way around. Hard to tell in a practice because the intensity in a practice just isn't what it is in a game. Thought he had a solid debut. He only played the 1 of 2 games, but he's right. Like Bjornfoot is no longer waivers exempt. It's his time, right? It's his time to kind of hit that next level. It's his time to assert himself on that LD3 spot. He's very comfortable with Jordan Spence. They were the top pair in the AHL last season with Ontario. Very, very different player than Andreas Engelland and a different player than Jacob Moverara. So it's an important preseason for Bjornfoot. I really like his collection of abilities, and now you want to see him kind of assert those into these final preseason games.
All right, the Australian trip is behind us. We're going to focus a little bit more on some of the preseason stuff we have seen here in the States, including a big preseason win over Vegas. We'll do that with LA Kings Insider Zach Dooley here on Locked on LA Kings, your team every day. Missing the syrup for your pancakes, or did you just run out of your favorite coffee creamer? With DoorDash grocery delivery, you can get what you want right when you need it. You've trusted DoorDash to deliver your restaurant favorites, and now you can get groceries delivered with thousands of stores to choose from. You can use your favorites in your neighborhood and boost the local economy with every order. Want even more value? Get 50% off your first DoorDash order, up to $20 value when you use code LOCKED on checkout. Limited time offer, terms apply. That's 50% off, up to $20. No minimum subtotal or delivery fee on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter code LOCKED. Don't forget, that's code LOCKED for 50% off your first order with DoorDash. More with LA Kings insider Zach Dooley. And the Kings JV knocked off the defending Stanley Cup champs last night. Basically, the Ontario Reign beating the Golden Knights in Vegas last night, 4-3 in overtime. Akil Thomas had a hat trick. Tyler Madden scored the overtime game winner. And unlike the game in Anaheim on Sunday, which was kind of the Ontario Reign against the San Diego Gulls, Vegas had some big players in their lineup: Jack Eichel, Jonathan Marchessault, Alex Pietrangelo, Mark Stone, who got freight trained by Hayden Hodgson. Zach, I normally don't get too excited one way or the other over preseason results, but what a great win by a group of young Kings with not a lot of NHL experience on the road against the defending champs, playing some of their biggest stars.
Yeah, it was awesome, right? You had a group of guys who have an opportunity because the Australia trip sets up those younger players to get more exhibition games with the main group off this week from gameplay. And they took advantage of it. You had guys who were hungry. Akil Thomas, terrible luck with injuries over the last couple of years, but he was drafted as a very exciting prospect. 3 goals for him in the city that he got injured in originally. That's awesome. Really great story. But Alex Laferriere played a really good game. Brent Clark played a really good game. Tyler Madden gets that goal in overtime. Great for him, a guy who's really developed nicely over the last couple of years. Really, really exciting to see that group play that well. You do see it sometimes in the preseason when you have a veteran group kind of getting up to speed. They're probably not 100%, whereas that group with the King side was 100%. They were engaged, they were committed, and it was just really nice to see them play so well. And you have to wonder now, there aren't a ton of battles and roster spots up for grabs at the NHL level, but some of those guys are setting themselves up to when there's an injury or two or a performance issue, they're going to be the first or second name on the mind of Rob Blake and Todd McLellan. And that's all they can do in these games, play their best, put themselves in the best position available to either make the roster or to be one of those first call-ups. And a lot of guys did that last night.
The big story going into that game was the return of Brent Clark from a minor injury. It caused him to miss the trip to Australia. He was on the top pairing. He played 28 minutes, 47 seconds, had 2 assists. It seemed like a pretty positive first outing for Brent Clark. We talked about Jordan Spence. How do you see things playing out on the Brent Clark end of things?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about Spence taking his opportunity. Brent Clark's had one opportunity, and I thought he played very, very well, right? He had to be the number 1 defenseman playing against a top 6 that had one line with Eichel and Stone and the other line with Marchessault and Stevenson. So all those guys were there. Those are top level players, and he held his own. He played a very strong game. I know he was really disappointed not to be able to go to Australia, and rightfully so. He was on that roster, suffered an unfortunate injury. The timing was awful, but the timelines just didn't line up to where he could get the practice and rehab he needed in Australia. So he stayed back. He got the work in, went in with the right attitude, and the coaches spelled it out as like, this is your opportunity to be with this group, to excel, to play more games, and then to rejoin us when you get back. He was back with the main group today. And like I said, it's going to be a tough battle between those 2 guys because they've both put their best foot forward. And that's exactly what you want to see from guys in that position.
Now, I know you were in Australia, but talking about what we saw in the rookie face-off in Vegas with some of these guys, obviously the first 2 preseason games against the Ducks and now against Vegas. But some guys that stood out for me, Francesco Pinelli, Alex Laferriere, and goalie Jacob Ingham has been a really nice story so far, coming back off the injury that he had that caused him to miss almost all of last season. What are some of the things maybe you've seen and heard about some of the players that I've mentioned or others that have tried to take advantage of the situation that you're talking about, being able to play in some of these preseason games with the guys coming back from Australia?
Yeah, for sure. I think you're highlighting, some names I've heard as well. And those are the names you want to hear, right? You want to hear Francesco Pinelli, who's now 20, who's now about to play his first pro year. You want him to be a noticeable player. Same with Alex Laferriere, right? He has 2 years in the NCAA, one of the most productive players in the country. you want him to be excelling in these games. And he did exactly that. I think he has 3 goals from 4 games between the rookie faceoff and the preseason. Those 2 guys were noticeable, not just to you or me, but to the organization as well. And that's a really good thing. And Jacob Ingham, incredible story. He had a really tough year last year with injuries, didn't play a single game. He's only played a couple of games in his career at the AHL level, but to play as well as he did at rookie faceoff, played very well, to my understanding, in Anaheim. Wasn't able to watch that game with the flight back, but really good on him to come in now on an AHL deal, not an NHL deal, and play the way that the Kings knew that he was capable of when he was picked. I mean, goalies sometimes take a while, right? Maybe this is him finally turning into that player. He's a big guy, very athletic, has all the tools, just hasn't played a ton of games over the last few years due to injury, circumstance, COVID. Set him back in his development a little bit, but he has the tools, and maybe this is the year he can put it all together. The Kings have a lot of goalies signed, might start in the ECHL, but he'll go down with the right attitude. And if he keeps playing this way, he won't stay there. He'll get his look. So it's really good to see him kind of excel the way that he has, because he's such a good guy and he's put the work in to get to this point.
Yeah, I was going to ask just kind of a follow-up on a couple of those guys. I don't know if you know the answer to this or not, but is there an opportunity for Ingham, you think? I know Eric Portillo is somebody we're excited about because of, playing at the University of Michigan at a high level. But the way Ingham has played so far, I wonder if there's an opportunity for him to start the year in Ontario. And for Pinelli, I know he hasn't signed yet, but there's no way he goes back to junior, right?
No, he's signed. He's on an ELC.
He is signed. Okay.
Yeah, he'll be with the Kings or the Reign this year for sure to start the year. Same with LaFerrier, and you never know on Ingham, right? That's why you're in training camp. There are battles for those spots. Not exactly sure how they'll roll out the situation in Ontario. There's also, could a goalie be claimed on waivers? You never know, right? How injuries go in around the league. So he's going to keep playing. He'll play as well as he can, and you never know how they'll start. But the good thing too is if you want to switch them for a bit, if it's Portillo and Ingham, you can do so freely. You can get guys games at different levels and move them back. So it's not a set in stone thing, but he's certainly put himself in the best spot that he could have with his play here in these first 3 games.
All right, we're going to get some more early thoughts on the Kings who are working on their summer project. You hopefully know what we're talking about. We'll explain if you don't. Next on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Hey, be sure to check out Locked On NHL. It's your daily show to keep you updated on everything going on around the National Hockey League. I'm sure the big story today was the injury to Lightning goalie Andrei Vasilevskiy. They'll be talking about that and more. That's Locked On NHL on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Continuing with the LA Kings insider Zach Dooley. And I know there hasn't been a lot of opportunities to evaluate the penalty kill of the Kings at this point, but I know it's something that they have obviously focused on. I mentioned the summer project. That's what Todd McClellan said in his exit interview. The penalty kill was their summer project. I heard that they did work on it specifically today in practice. Any early thoughts on what they're trying to do differently or what the coaches and players are saying about that new look penalty kill so far?
Yeah, they did work on it today for a bit. It was kind of the introductory day on the ice because they had to play those games in Arizona. They were on the penalty kill several times, but they didn't have the chance to go over it on the ice. It's not something you do in those first few skates of training camp. You do it later on. So today was the day where they kind of worked on the PK. We talked with Todd McClellan, with a couple of the guys, and they all know that it needs to get better. They all know that changes need to be made. I think today was that day where they could get into it. They learned the details, and they're still thinking about it. They got to get it to a point where they're no longer thinking about it. They're just executing it. So it's going to be a process. We saw what the power play did last year, went from the bottom of the league to the top of the league. It didn't happen overnight. They had to work at it. It wasn't perfect early in the year, but it got better and better and better as they got more comfortable. By the end of the year, that PP was clicking, right? They scored as many goals on special teams in the postseason as the Oilers did in that series. So that wasn't the issue, but it took some time to get to that point. We have to be a little bit patient, I think, with the PK. It's not going to come out of the gates most likely and just be fixed. It's going to take a little bit of time, but they're working on it. They're making some tweaks, making some changes to the details. And the hope will be that they can kind of get that ship righted because it was an issue for a lot of last year.
Obviously things can change, but from a personnel standpoint, is it Trevor Lewis the only kind of addition we've seen so far to the PK as far as for the guys we saw that were working on it last year?
Well, a couple of notes. I think that an addition that you don't think of as an addition is Trevor Moore. I think he led the league in shorthanded goals in 21-22, but he played less last year because of injury. He had a really difficult second half of the year. But he's a guy who might partner with, say, Philippe Deneau again on that PK unit, his regular line mate. That could be a big addition because of how good he was on the PK the year before. And an interesting name that we saw kill penalties in Melbourne was Kevin Fiala. Not a guy we maybe expected on the PK, but he was towards the end of the unit. His speed and his length are both huge assets for him. So maybe he's that guy who could be utilized towards the end of the penalty kill to maybe take advantage of some tired legs, maybe spring something the other way. So early goings for sure. We'll see how PK pairings are kind of deployed as these exhibition games with the main group continue. But we saw Trevor Moore, we saw Trevor Lewis, and we saw Kevin Fiala utilizing those Global Series games.
So we're about halfway through the preseason, 4 games down, 5 to go. We've got another game coming up with the Ducks on Friday. That's the first home preseason game for the LA Kings. So we've seen the prospects and the AHL guys so far as the North American preseason games. How do we start to transition and maybe incorporate some of the NHL regulars into the preseason lineups? How does that work kind of going forward, do you think?
We'll see some of the Australia group worked in over the weekend. I don't think you're going to see Anze Kopitar travel to San Jose, but we will see some NHL guys from that Australia trip get back into the games this weekend. And then you'll likely see the bigger names or Kopitar's, Doughty's in that home game against Anaheim next week. But I do think you'll see a decent chunk of the Australia group play either in San Diego or San Jose. It would just be one practice for guys who might go tomorrow. So I don't think it'll be a ton of guys in that boat. But for sure in that San Jose game on Saturday, we'll see maybe guys kind of towards the back end of that Australia group. And then the bigger name guys, the veterans, likely will get back into action against the Ducks on Tuesday.
And I know your focus is obviously on the LA Kings, but I would like to get your thoughts before the season starts on what you think about the Pacific Division this year. It seems like the Kings certainly were the only team that made a big splash getting PL Dubois. Vegas, Edmonton, kind of the same teams, although that was still very good. Calgary's had their issues more off the ice with new GM, new head coach, that kind of a thing. But just anything on the Pacific Division, if you wouldn't mind.
I mean, Edmonton and Vegas are your big players, right? You look at the depth down the middle, and the Kings are now kind of in that conversation with the Golden Knights and the Oilers for how strong they are at the center ice position. You have a couple of teams in Anaheim and San Jose who I think are more in that rebuilding phase. They're younger players. They've torn down. Now they're trying to build back up. And then the Canadian teams, Vancouver and Calgary, are a little bit more of the wild cards, right? You don't exactly know what you're getting from them. They have some veterans. They have some younger guys. Didn't perform all that well last year, but Calgary was a playoff team. I think they won the division just a year before that. So they're a team kind of in transition. You don't exactly know what you're going to get, but new coaches, maybe some players get back to form. Maybe they're a little bit better. And then there's obviously Seattle, who had a terrific year last year. They're that hard to play against team. They don't have those superstars like Edmonton does, but they're 1 to 12 up front, 1 to 6 on the back end is so solid. Like they run 4 lines, 3 pairs as effectively as anyone. They're going to be a tough team to play against. So I think it's a division that'll need to see one of those teams towards the bottom rise up to make it a little bit more competitive, but it's going to be very strong for sure at the top. And you have 4 teams, LA, Edmonton, Vegas, Seattle, who should all expect to be playoff teams, all maybe pushing for home ice or even a division title, but also teams like Calgary and Vancouver who don't count themselves out as non-playoff teams, who have some veterans and who believe that they can kind of compete. So hopefully it's a competitive division, and hopefully what the Kings did in the offseason has prepared them to be kind of towards the top of that pile.
Well, certainly excited to get things going here. That is friend of the show, Zach Dooley, the LA Kings Insider. Again, follow him on Twitter at Dooley, LAK, DOOLEY, LAK, and of course at LAKingsInsider.com to keep you up to date on everything going on with the Los Angeles Kings. Zach, always appreciate the time. Looking forward to seeing you out there at Crypto.com Arena soon. And just excited about the season. Always appreciate your time. Thank you.
Anytime, man. No problem.
All right. That is Zach Dooley. Hope you guys always enjoy that conversation. He's always so kind with his time in joining us here on Locked On LA Kings. As we wrap it up for you everydayers, those of you that listen and watch every day, tomorrow we'll have our weekly Friday Kings fan feedback show. There is still time to get in an email if you'd like. LockedOnEddie@gmail.com is the email address. You can always post your comments below if you are watching on YouTube as well. We'd love you to stay interactive with the show 24/7. On social media, we are on Twitter or X or whatever the hell they're calling it, and on Instagram, both at Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you as always for listening and watching Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Have yourself a great day. We will talk to you tomorrow. And as always, go Kings go.